By the time Daniel Mercer realized his wife was preparing to leave him, she had already made one dangerous mistake. Madison believed he was too trusting to notice the silence, too loyal to question the lies, and too broken to protect himself before the divorce papers arrived. Daniel had been married to Madison for 4 years. They lived in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, in a modest 2-story house with a maple tree in the front yard and wedding photos still hanging in the hallway. Their life was not rich or dramatic, but it felt steady. Sunday mornings meant coffee, grocery shopping, and slow drives home. Friday nights meant take out a movie and Madison falling asleep before the ending. They hosted 4th of July cookouts, sent Christmas cards to relatives, and argued over harmless things like the thermostat or what to order for dinner. To Daniel, that was marriage. Not perfect, but real. Then Madison began changing in small ways. At first, Daniel almost felt guilty for noticing. She started carrying her phone everywhere. Before, she would leave it on the kitchen counter or buried between couch cushions. Now it followed her from room to room, even when she was only doing laundry or stepping onto the porch. One night while they were cleaning up after dinner, her screen lit up on the table. Daniel barely turned his head before Madison reached over and flipped it face down. He laughed and asked if she was running a secret government operation. She smiled and said it was just work, but her smile felt empty. A few days later, she added a passcode to her phone. When Daniel asked about it, Madison gave him a calm explanation about identity theft and online security. It sounded reasonable. That was what bothered him. Every answer sounded reasonable by itself. Only when he placed them together did they begin to look like something else. Soon she was taking calls outside the room. Her phone would ring and she would say she needed 1 second before disappearing into the hallway, the bedroom, or the backyard. When she came back, Daniel would ask who called. She always said it was someone from work. The distance between them grew quieter but heavier. Madison no longer talked about the future. If Daniel mentioned Thanksgiving plans, replacing his old truck, or taking a weekend trip for their anniversary, she gave vague answers and changed the subject. She was still in the house, still sitting across from him at dinner, still sleeping beside him at night, but emotionally she felt far away. Daniel tried to explain it as stress. He wanted a normal reason. A hard month at work. A private problem. Anything felt better than admitting his wife might be planning something behind his back. One Wednesday evening, Daniel drove past a coffee shop near Madison's office while running errands. Madison had told him she was meeting a friend there after work. He almost kept driving, but then he saw her outside near the side entrance. She was not with a friend. She was pacing with her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in a low, serious voice. Daniel pulled into a nearby parking lot and sat there feeling foolish and uneasy at the same time. He could not hear everything, but he heard enough. Madison said, "It's almost ready." Then after a pause, she added, "I just need everything in place first." A moment later, she said, "Starting fresh soon." Those words stayed with him the whole drive home. Starting fresh. When Madison came back later, Daniel casually asked how coffee went. She immediately told him a detailed story about her friend complaining about her boyfriend. The story came too fast, too polished, and Madison never looked him directly in the eyes. Daniel nodded, but something inside him tightened. He knew what he had seen. He knew what he had heard. And he knew his wife had just lied without hesitation. That weekend, Madison brought up the finances. Daniel was making pancakes while she sat at the kitchen island scrolling through her phone. Without warning, she asked if they should organize all their account information in one place. Bank accounts, passwords, insurance papers, house documents, emergency information. Daniel turned from the stove and asked why she was suddenly thinking about that. Madison shrugged and said married people should be responsible just in case something happened. On the surface, it made sense, but Madison had never cared about paperwork before. Daniel handled most of the bills, and she had never asked about property documents or account details. Now, after secret calls and a strange conversation about starting fresh, she suddenly wanted access to everything. A few days later, she asked again. This time, Daniel did not let it pass. He asked why she kept bringing up the bank information. Madison looked surprised, then quickly said nothing was wrong. She claimed she was only trying to be practical, but her answer felt rehearsed, and the way she avoided his eyes told him more than her words did. Daniel let the conversation end, not because he believed her, but because he understood that pressing too hard might warn her. The next morning after Madison left for work, Daniel logged into their joint checking account. He expected to find nothing. Instead, he found several small withdrawals spread across the past few weeks. None were large enough to create panic. None were obvious enough to prove anything. But they did not match bills, groceries, gas, restaurants, or any normal household expense. Daniel stared at the screen for a long time. It was not proof, and that almost made it worse. Proof would have told him what to do. This only gave him a sick feeling. So Daniel called Ryan, an old college friend who worked as a family attorney in Indiana. Daniel explained everything carefully: the phone secrecy, the private calls, the coffee shop, the financial questions, and the strange withdrawals. Ryan listened quietly. When Daniel finished, Ryan told him not to confront Madison emotionally and not to make threats. Then he said something Daniel could not forget. If someone was preparing legal or financial moves behind his back, trust would not protect him. Preparation would. That evening, Madison came home, kissed his cheek, and asked if he wanted tacos from their favorite place. Daniel smiled and said yes. He acted normal through dinner, through the small talk, through every moment she checked her phone under the table. But inside, something had changed. He still loved her, and that made it hurt more. Love did not disappear just because suspicion arrived. For the next few days, Daniel watched quietly. Madison suddenly became warmer. She suggested movies. She touched his arm in the hallway. She laughed too loudly at one of his jokes, and somehow that made him more certain, not less. Because she never mentioned the finances again. The subject she had pushed twice disappeared the moment Daniel questioned her. That was when Daniel knew he had not imagined it. Something was coming. He did not know when Madison would make her move, but he knew one thing with cold certainty. When she finally did, he could not afford to be surprised. Daniel did not sleep much after that. Every sound in the house felt sharper than before: Madison's footsteps in the hallway, the buzz of her phone, the soft click of the bedroom door when she stepped out to take another call. He hated what suspicion was doing to him, but what he hated most was the thought that Ryan might be right. If Madison was preparing something, love would not protect him from being unprepared. The next morning, Daniel called Ryan again from a Home Depot parking lot, sitting in his truck with a coffee going cold. Ryan told him to stay calm, document everything, and speak with a local attorney before making any major decision. Daniel spent that afternoon gathering bank statements, mortgage paperwork, investment records, tax returns, insurance files, and every document connected to the house. It felt wrong. Every folder reminded him of a life he had built with Madison, not against her. Still, he made copies, saved records, and wrote down dates. The withdrawals, the strange questions, the coffee shop, the calls. By evening, Daniel had spoken with a divorce attorney in Columbus. The conversation was not dramatic. There were no promises, revenge speeches, or clever tricks. The attorney simply explained what mattered, what was separate, what was marital, what records counted, and how ugly things could become if one spouse filed first with a prepared strategy. Daniel asked questions he never imagined he would need to ask. What if one spouse had already moved money? What if someone made false claims? What if the other person was being coached? The attorney did not accuse Madison of anything. He only told Daniel that preparation was not cruelty. Preparation was protection. That sentence stayed with him. That night, Daniel sat in his home office while Madison watched a cooking show downstairs. On his desk were documents that belonged to their marriage, the deed to the house, old bank records, retirement statements, and a folder Madison had once labeled future plans. Inside were ideas for vacations, home repairs, and a handwritten note about starting a family someday. Daniel stared at it before closing the folder. He was not trying to destroy Madison. He was trying to make sure she could not destroy him. Over the next several days, Daniel moved carefully. He separated the money that legally belonged to him before the marriage. He removed Madison's access from accounts she did not need to use. He changed passwords on personal financial profiles and stored copies of important records with his mother, Linda. Daniel did not tell her everything. He could not say the worst parts out loud. He only told her he needed a safe place for documents in case things became complicated. Linda was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Are you in trouble?" Daniel looked down at the box. "I don't know yet." That answer scared her more than a lie would have. She opened the door wider and let him in. They sat at her kitchen table where Daniel had done homework as a teenager, and she listened while he explained what he could. He told her Madison had been acting strangely. He told her about the financial questions and the withdrawals. He did not describe the coffee shop in detail because saying it would make it feel too real. Linda did not interrupt. When he finished, she reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "I hope you're wrong," she said softly. "But if you're not, I'm glad you came to me first." For the first time in days, Daniel almost broke. He had been holding himself together with logic, paperwork, and quiet discipline. But hearing his mother say that made the hurt rise in his throat. He nodded, swallowed it down, and thanked her. There would be time to fall apart later. Right now, he needed to think clearly. At home, Madison changed again. Not distant this time, sweet, almost careful. She asked if Daniel wanted to go out for dinner. She suggested inviting neighbors over for a Saturday barbecue. She even talked about repainting the guest room, something she had ignored for months. Anyone else might have seen it as a good sign. Daniel saw it as timing. She was keeping the surface peaceful while waiting for something underneath to finish moving. Then one evening, Daniel noticed a name on her phone before she turned it away. Jake. It appeared only for a second, but long enough. Madison saw his eyes shift toward the screen and her hand closed around the phone immediately. She stood up from the couch and said she needed to take the call outside. Daniel did not follow her. He simply sat there staring at the muted television while the pieces arranged themselves in his mind. A coworker, a friend, a coach, maybe something worse. After that night, Daniel paid closer attention. He did not spy through her phone. He did not accuse her. He simply watched patterns. Madison dressed more carefully on certain workdays. She stayed late more often. She came home with vague explanations and a new confidence in her voice, as if someone had been reminding her what she deserved. Once, while folding laundry, she said marriage should not make a woman feel trapped. Daniel asked if she felt trapped. She smiled too quickly and said she was speaking generally. But Daniel understood. She was practicing. 2 weeks after his first call with Ryan, Madison asked him to sit with her on the living room couch. She turned off the television, placed her phone face down beside her, and folded her hands in her lap. Her expression was calm, almost rehearsed. "I think we should get a divorce," Madison said. The room went quiet. Daniel looked at the woman he had loved for years and realized the moment he had been dreading had finally arrived. But this time he was not surprised. He was ready. Daniel expected Madison to cry when she said the word divorce. He expected anger, guilt, maybe confusion. Instead, she sat across from him with the calm expression of someone who had practiced the scene many times before. She said she needed space. She said she had lost herself in the marriage. She said she wanted to become the woman she was meant to be. Daniel listened without interrupting. The phrases sounded borrowed, like lines from a podcast, a self-help book, or someone else's mouth. Madison spoke about sacrifice, emotional growth, and how she deserved more from life. She did not mention love. She did not mention the good years, the house they had painted together, the Christmas mornings, or the nights he stayed awake helping her through work stress. She spoke as if the marriage had been a cage and Daniel had been the person holding the key. When she finished, Daniel nodded slowly. He did not beg. He did not accuse her. He only asked what she wanted to do next. Madison blinked, clearly surprised by his calm response. For a moment, irritation flashed across her face. She had expected him to break, to plead, to promise he would change. Maybe someone had told her guilt would make him easier to control. But Daniel gave her nothing useful. The next Monday, the divorce papers arrived. Daniel stood in his driveway holding the envelope, while a school bus rolled down the street and a neighbor walked a Labrador past his mailbox. Everything around him looked painfully normal. Inside the envelope, his marriage had become a legal demand. Madison was asking for half the house, a large share of his savings, part of his investments, the newer car, and temporary spousal support, even though she had a strong salary of her own. The language was cold, specific, and aggressive. It did not sound like Madison. It sounded like someone had built a plan for her and handed it over. Daniel's attorney was not surprised when he reviewed the papers. He only leaned back and said this was prepared carefully. Carefully meant Madison had not acted out of sudden heartbreak. Carefully meant she had been thinking, gathering, calculating. Carefully meant the questions about passwords and documents were not harmless after all. That night, Daniel searched quietly for the name he had seen on Madison's phone. Jake. He did not know his last name at first, but Madison's social media gave him the answer. Jake was a marketing manager at her company, a man in his early 30s with gym photos, restaurant check-ins, and motivational captions about freedom. Daniel scrolled through public posts with a tight jaw. Jake had liked nearly every recent photo of Madison. On one picture he had commented, "Proud of you. Big things ahead." Under another, he had written, "New chapter." Daniel kept scrolling until he found the coffee shop. Jake had posted a photo from the same place on the same Wednesday Daniel had seen Madison outside. The caption was simple: "Some plans are worth waiting for." Daniel stared at it longer than he should have. It was not proof of an affair or anything a court would care about, but it was proof enough for Daniel's heart. Madison had not been alone in this. Still, Daniel knew suspicion was not strategy. He sent screenshots to his attorney and called Ryan. Ryan warned him not to confront Jake, not to post anything online, and not to let anger make him careless. Madison's plan depended on him reacting emotionally. If he looked unstable or vindictive, she could use that against him. So he stayed quiet. A few days later, Daniel reached out to Lisa, a mutual friend who had known Madison for years. He kept the conversation polite, saying he was only trying to understand what had happened. Lisa sounded tense from the beginning. She said Madison was going through a lot. She said divorce was complicated. When Daniel asked whether Madison had been spending time with someone from work, Lisa paused too long. Then she said she did not want to get involved. That pause told Daniel almost as much as an answer. He called another friend, Emily, and got the same careful tone. Emily said she had heard things but did not know what was true. Daniel thanked her and ended the call, assuming that was all he would get. 10 minutes later, Emily called back. Her voice was lower now, nervous. She said she could not be dragged into the middle of it, but Daniel deserved to know Madison had been talking constantly to Jake. According to Emily, Jake had been giving Madison advice about the divorce, telling her she had sacrificed too much and should not settle for less than she deserved. Daniel closed his eyes as he listened. Every strange piece now had a place. The hidden calls, the financial questions, the sudden confidence, the rehearsed speech. Madison had not simply fallen out of love. She had been coached into turning their marriage into a payout. On Saturday, Daniel drove near Madison's new apartment, not to confront her, but to confirm what he already knew. He parked across the street and waited. After nearly an hour, Madison came out with Jake. They were not holding hands, but they did not need to. They walked close, laughing softly, leaning toward each other with the comfort of people who had already crossed a line. Daniel did not follow them. He did not take a photo. He simply sat there until Jake's car disappeared around the corner. Then he drove home to the quiet house. Madison wanted half of walked into the office and opened the folder his attorney had prepared. For the first time since this began, Daniel no longer felt confused. He felt betrayed. But beneath the betrayal was something colder and steadier. He was ready for mediation. The mediation office sat on the 8th floor of a downtown Columbus building. Daniel arrived early with his attorney and a folder that made his hands feel heavy. He had barely spoken during the drive. Madison had made her move. Now Daniel had to let the truth breathe. Madison walked in 10 minutes later with her lawyer. She looked polished, almost victorious, in a cream blazer and heels, like she was walking into an important business meeting instead of the wreckage of a marriage. She did not look at Daniel for long. Her eyes passed over him, then settled on the conference table, where her attorney began arranging papers with practiced confidence. The first hour was exactly what Daniel expected. Madison's attorney spoke about fairness, sacrifice, emotional hardship, and the life Madison had helped build. He said she deserved half the house, a major portion of Daniel's savings, access to investment accounts, the newer vehicle, and temporary support while she adjusted to her new life. Every demand sounded as if Daniel was selfish for questioning it. Daniel sat quietly. Madison watched him from across the table, waiting for the reaction she had probably imagined many times. Maybe she expected anger. Maybe she expected fear. Maybe she expected him to fold because the word divorce still felt like a knife between his ribs. But Daniel kept his hands folded and listened. When Madison's lawyer finished, Daniel's attorney opened his folder. "Before we discuss any settlement," he said calmly, "there are several documents everyone needs to review." He slid copies across the table. Madison's attorney took them first. At the beginning, his expression stayed confident. Then his eyes narrowed. He turned one page, then another. Madison leaned closer, trying to see what he was reading. "What is this?" her lawyer asked. Daniel's attorney did not raise his voice. Records showing separate property account history, dated transfers, and signed legal documents regarding assets that were never available for the settlement Madison is requesting. They were handled before the filing and properly documented. Madison's face tightened. That's impossible. Her attorney did not answer her. He kept reading. Daniel could almost see him realizing what Madison had failed to say. Daniel had not walked into mediation blind. Every financial question Madison had asked had been noticed, and the dramatic list of demands had nowhere firm to stand. Madison snatched one page from the table. Her eyes moved quickly over the dates and signatures. Color rose in her cheeks. "You planned this," she said. Daniel finally looked directly at her. "I protected myself." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. Then the anger arrived. She accused him of hiding things, betraying the marriage, and punishing her for wanting freedom. The words came fast, but they did not land the way she wanted. Daniel did not interrupt. He let her speak, because everyone could hear the panic underneath her outrage. Her attorney asked for a break. Madison followed him into the hallway, but her voice carried through the closed door. Daniel could not hear every word, only sharp pieces. She had not known. He had tricked her. There had to be a way around it. Her attorney's replies were quieter, but Daniel understood the tone. He was not comforting her. He was managing a client who had given him an incomplete story. When they returned, the room felt different. Madison no longer looked victorious. Her lawyer no longer sounded bold. He said they needed more time to review the documents and reconsider their position. Daniel's attorney agreed without emotion. The meeting ended earlier than planned. In the hallway, Madison caught up to Daniel before he reached the elevator. "This is not over," she said, her voice low and shaking. Daniel turned to her. For a second, he saw the woman from the wedding photo, the woman who once laughed with him under string lights. Then he saw the woman who had lied at the coffee shop, asked for account information, and walked out with Jake. "I already know," Daniel said. "That's why I stopped trusting your version of over." He stepped into the elevator before she could answer. The call started that night. At first, Madison sounded controlled. She left one voicemail saying they should talk like adults. Then, another saying things had gone too far. By the next day, her tone shifted. She cried, apologized, accused him, then cried again. One message said she had never meant to hurt him. Another said he had destroyed her life. Daniel saved every voicemail and responded to none. When calls failed, Madison tried their friends. She told people the divorce had been a misunderstanding, then a test, then something Daniel had twisted to make her look cruel. Some believed her at first. A few sent Daniel cold messages asking why he had been so harsh. He did not defend himself online. He sent everything to his attorney and waited. Then Matt, an old friend from their circle, reached out. He asked Daniel to meet at a diner off the highway, the kind with cracked red booths and burned coffee. Matt looked uncomfortable before he even sat down. He placed his phone on the table and said Daniel needed to see something. The messages were between Madison and Jake. Daniel read them once, then again. Madison had not simply been venting. She and Jake had discussed the settlement, the money, the house, and what they would do after Daniel agreed. Jake had encouraged her not to back down. He had told her to make Daniel feel guilty. He had promised they could start fresh once she secured what she deserved. Daniel set the phone down carefully. The pain was not sharp anymore. It was deeper than that. Quieter. This was no longer suspicion, no longer a misunderstanding, no longer a marriage that had simply fallen apart. It was a plan. And now, at last, Daniel had proof. Daniel did not leave the diner angry. Anger would have been easier. Anger burned hot and gave a man something to do with his hands. What Daniel felt was colder. He drove home through the Ohio evening with Matt's screenshots saved and forwarded to his attorney, feeling as if the marriage had not died in one moment but had been quietly taken apart while he was still trying to protect it. The messages changed everything. Madison could no longer pretend the divorce had been a misunderstanding. She could no longer claim she only wanted space. In those texts, her plan was written plainly. Jake had told her to push hard, make Daniel feel guilty, and not settle until she had enough money to start over comfortably. Madison had replied like someone who believed the future was already waiting, paid for by the man she was leaving behind. Daniel's attorney was careful. He reminded Daniel that emotion did not win anything. Records did. Dates did. Documents did. So Daniel stayed quiet again. He did not post the screenshots. He did not call Madison to demand answers. He did not send Jake a message, though part of him wanted to. He let his attorney handle everything. For the first time in months, silence did not feel weak. It felt powerful. Within a week, Madison's story began to crack. She had told friends Daniel was cruel. Then she said he had overreacted. Then she claimed the divorce filing had only been a test to see whether he would fight for the marriage. But people had questions. Why hire a lawyer for a test? Why ask for half a house savings, investments, a car, and support if it was only a cry for help? The more Madison explained, the worse it sounded. Then the screenshots reached the people closest to her. Daniel did not know who shared them first, and he did not ask. He only knew that calls from mutual friends changed tone almost overnight. People who had sent him cold messages now apologized awkwardly. Lisa texted that she had not known the whole truth. Emily said she was sorry for staying quiet. Even Madison's brother, who had accused Daniel of being heartless, called and admitted he had believed the wrong person. "I thought she was falling apart," her brother said. "I didn't know she was planning this." Daniel accepted the apology, but he did not take comfort in it. Being believed after betrayal did not erase the betrayal. It only stopped the wound from being blamed on him. Meanwhile, Jake disappeared from Madison's life with insulting speed. The man who had promised a fresh start stopped showing up in her posts, stopped being seen near her apartment, and apparently stopped answering her calls once it became clear there would be no big settlement. Daniel heard this from others, never from Madison. He was not surprised. Jake had invested in a fantasy, not in Madison. When the money vanished, so did he. Madison tried to reach Daniel after that. At first, her voicemails were angry. She said he had ruined everything. She said he had humiliated her. She said he had turned people against her. Then the anger thinned into panic. She cried. She apologized. She said Jake had manipulated her. She said she had been confused, lonely, and afraid of wasting her life. She said Daniel was the only person who had ever loved her. Daniel listened to one message all the way through. Then he saved it for his attorney and closed the phone. There had been a time when those tears would have pulled him back. There had been a time when he would have driven across town, sat beside her, and tried to understand the pain behind her choices. But that version of Daniel had trusted her. That version had believed love meant giving someone endless chances to explain why they hurt you. The man sitting alone in the quiet house understood something different now. Love without respect could become a trap. Forgiveness did not require returning to the person who broke you. By the time the divorce was finalized, Madison walked away with far less than she had expected. The aggressive demands collapsed under the weight of records, dates, and her own messages. Daniel kept the house, his savings, and the peace he had nearly lost. Madison kept her belongings, her embarrassment, and whatever story she needed to tell herself. The first weekend after everything ended, Linda came over with 2 paint cans, takeout containers, and the determined energy only a mother could bring into a wounded house. She opened windows, pulled down old pictures, and told Daniel the living room needed a new color. He almost laughed for the first time in weeks. They spent the afternoon painting over the wall where one wedding photo had hung. The empty spot looked strange at first, almost painful. But as the fresh color dried, Daniel realized the house did not feel haunted anymore. It felt unfinished, and unfinished was not the same as broken. That evening, Daniel stood on the back patio, while the neighborhood settled into a quiet American summer night. Somewhere nearby, a lawnmower hummed. Kids shouted in a driveway. Smoke from someone's grill drifted over the fence. Life went on in the ordinary way it always had, and for once ordinary felt like mercy. Madison became a chapter Daniel no longer reread. Not because it had not mattered, but because it had ended. She had tried to turn his trust into weakness, and for a while she almost succeeded. But Daniel had learned the difference between being loyal and being blind. He did not feel victorious. He felt free. And sometimes freedom did not arrive with applause or revenge. Sometimes it arrived quietly in a house that finally felt like his again, with fresh paint on the walls and no phone buzzing in the dark.